Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and a couple of Slimline Halloween cards using one of my favorite Halloween sets, which is the CZ Design Witch Please stamp set. I love this set, and I've already done a couple videos in past. Was it last year? Did it come out last year or the year before? I don't even remember anymore. It's one of my faves anyway. I've done a couple videos on it last year. I think it came out. And yeah, it had to make an appearance in this year's Halloween series. And I paired it with another oldie but goodie fave. This is the Wildflower set, which as of me filming this intro, I think this set's out of stock, but you can always click to get notified when it comes back in. I will post a link at the end of this video to my playlist using this stamp set because I've used it a lot. It's a favorite. So I combined the two, and I used black glitter embossing powder. I used black embossing powder. I had fun making these, and yeah, just keep watching and I'll show you guys how I made them. And I will also have at the end of the video a link to my Halloween series playlist, because as I keep making them, I keep adding them to that playlist, so it's just easy to find everything. And then, like always, I will have links below the video to the blog post, supply list, links to everything, all of that. So, and below, things up in the corner for other random videos that pop up, it's all there. So yeah, keep watching and I'll show you guys how I made these cards. So I went blue this time, not purple. Thought I would try something a little different. So I went with Slimline cards. So I took 2 panels of white cardstock. These are like 3 1/4 by 8 1/4. And I have the Tim Holtz Moon Mask and stencil set, and I have the smallest one, and I'm using just the mask. And since I only have one, I'm gonna have to move it back and forth between both these panels, which is fine. And I just used a little bit of PIXIE tape rolled up to kind of hold the mask in place. And I am using Simon Says Stamp's Positively Saturated inks to do a very simple blended background, and I'm using Marine, Cadette, and Royal inks, starting with my lightest. I'm doing that at the bottom. And I'm just using one of my blending brushes and just working my way towards the top of the panel. So now I'm using Cadette, and I'm not too worried about keeping my blends perfect because like I'm going to stamp on top of this. I'm obviously going to add some splatter, the heat embossing, all the different things. And also, like always, these inks do just smooth out so beautifully as they dry, and it just works. So I don't really worry too much about my blending with these inks because they kind of take care of it for me, which I need all the help I can get some days. So I got to Royal here. And yeah, like I said, I'm just moving that little mask back and forth. You could also just die cut a circle, but I wanted to use the moon stencil as well, hence me doing this. And then towards the top, I pulled out Concord 9's Midnight ink. It's just a nice, it's a bit deeper of a blue shade. So, you know, just to really bring in that night sky look. So added that to the tops of these panels. And once I got that blended on, I pulled out the little moon stencil. Like I cleaned up my workspace, everything. And I was looking at it and I'm like, you have very little margin around the edge of the stencil. So at first I was going to use tape, you know, and normally that's what I would do. But it being circular, I was like, I'm going to have to use a lot of tape. This is going to be annoying. I immediately, it was like, nope, I got to work around for this. I took a circle wafer die that was just slightly smaller than this stencil, and I die cut a piece of vellum with it. So now the vellum is a mask, and the stencil just fits right over it, and I just kind of tape them together. And I'm going to keep that vellum mask with the packaging, and I can just keep reusing it, you know, over and over again. And that way I don't have to worry about getting ink where I don't want it. And with the other, because that Tim Holtz Moon Mask set has 3 different sizes. So I'll do the same thing next time I go to use it. If I want to use the medium size or the large size one, I'll just die cut a little mask from some vellum. It works. So over that stencil, I used Concord 9th Pebble ink, just very lightly. And I let this dry for a bit. And then my splatter is one of the new Mica stain colors, the Unravelled. This is part of the, Halloween set, but you can get it individually, and that's what I'll link to. I am loving. I bought backups of this one. I love it. So I shook it up really, really well first, because you gotta just really shake the mica stains up to get that mica mixed in properly with the liquid, regardless of whether you're going to spray it or do it like this. But I mixed it up really well. I put it on my palette, and then I just used my fan brush. And I had put that mask back on top of the moon because I didn't want the splatter on top of it. So the mask protects that little area. And then, add the mica stain to my little palette, picked it up with my fan brush, and then just splattered this over the entire background. And again, chef's kiss. I love the mica stains, and you guys know I love splatter. So it just created like the perfect kind of starry night sky background. I was having fun. So again, I let these dry because the positively saturated inks take a while to dry. I let them dry for a while. I actually went off and did some other things and came back to it, and then I tested it to see how dry it was. And by testing, I mean, I just poured embossing powder on there just to see. And it was still clinging to the Pebble ink. So I just took my little Ranger heat tool and just sped up that drying process because I want to make sure both of these backgrounds are completely dry, because I'm going to start working with some black embossing powder. And you guys know, if you've watched my videos for a decent length of time, I've made it very clear how much I hate black embossing powder. Like it is the devil. I hate it. But black glitter embossing powder is an exception to this. And I don't pull it out very often, but for Halloween cards, it's great. And this is the Nouveau Glitter Noir embossing powder. I've used this in many, many videos, and I love it. It's just beautiful and black and sparkly, and I'll show at the end of the video, the sparkliness. So I wanted to use that for the Witch silhouette stamp from the Witch Please stamp set. So I'd put the panel into my Misty. I stamped the image with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and then coated it with that black glitter embossing powder, and then melted it with my heat tool. And love. I just love it. It makes it stand out, and yet, it's just fun, So I did that with both backgrounds, and I also heavily use my anti-static powder tool, because you just don't want the embossing powder, especially when you're working with dark embossing powders. You do not want those sticking where they don't belong. I wanted it just on the image. So again, anti-static embossing powder or anti-static powder tool, stamped the image with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, coated it with the Glitter Noir embossing powder, melted that with my heat tool, and loved it. Just loved it. So once that was melted, then I decided to use black embossing powder. And yes, I have made it very clear my absolute hatred of black embossing powder over the years. I rarely ever use it. Really, it takes one time. You knock over one container of black embossing powder one time, you pretty much are going to hate it forever. It is the worst product to try and clean up, especially on carpet, because that's what happened. However, I've shown many workarounds, like use Stampin' Black and embossing clear. That's fine. It works. It looks great. That's generally what I do all the time. But there is no workaround to get like the crispest, blackest, like heat embossed image. You need black embossing powder, honestly. There is a difference. It's subtle. So you can still stamp in black and embossing clear. It is fine. But I was, my confidence was up after doing the Witch with the black glitter embossing powder, which that stuff, I've said this before, the black glitter embossing powder, not even remotely the same as black embossing powder. I think the glitter just makes it less frustrating to work with. Anywho, so I stamped the wildflower image along the bottom. You know, I had this plan, and as soon as I stamped it, I was like, yes. And you could leave it, but I needed to emboss it no matter what, either with clear or with black, because otherwise I would smear it and ruin the background. It's a given. I've talked about this a lot. I am clumsy. I get my elbows and things, all of it. So I used detail black embossing powder, and it just worked, and it was perfect in its own way. I know I always say perfection's overrated, but in this case it was chef's kiss perfect. Like the detail and just the crispness of it, and I was like, this was one of the few times, you know, where everything worked. And it's usually not like this. Like, I'm not kidding when I say my life is chaos. Things are nuts. I'm clumsy. You know, I make it work. Try to show you guys the random mistakes. A lot of times they happen off camera, and it usually involves me like knocking things over. But these cards it just worked. It was a good time. So I did it a second time. Stamped the wildflowers image along the bottom with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. Coated it with that detail black embossing powder, melted it with my heat tool, and it was good. It was good. I'm literally just shocked because, yeah. And then I pulled out some of my Luxe glitter cardstock. I've talked about this stuff. I've shown it in videos. I don't use it very often because I hoard it just like I hoard my powder and paper. But I needed to use it. Especially the black glitter. I was like, it's too perfect. So I die cut that black Luxe glitter cardstock, and I used the CZ Design Witch Please wafer die. And the other layers I just die cut from scraps of black cardstock, you know, it's plain black cardstock, and stacking those together to give them dimension. So I used my craft tacky glue, stacked 2 layers of just plain black cardstock, and then the top layer is the glitter cardstock. And again, at the end, when I like show the shimmer and the glitter and all the things, you can kind of see it a lot better. Right now on camera, it just doesn't look like a whole lot. On the die cut itself, you can kind of see it more on the solid piece. But yeah, stacked all those together. The dots for the eye, I just have in my little triangle tray. Those are set aside for when I assemble the card. So by this point, things were going real good. Like real good. So I was like, I'm gonna stamp a sentiment, and I'm gonna heat emboss it with black embossing powder on white cardstock, because that's the ultimate test. And again, it worked. I'm shocked. Because especially on white cardstock, a lot of times it seems like, you know, black embossing powder can leave like weird traces, almost like soot. You know, it's just weird, but everything was working. I'm almost a little like apprehensive. I was like, oh no, the next card I'm going to make, it's going to be a disaster. Everything's going to go wrong. Just, you know, karma to make up for it. Anywho, I stamped another one of the sentiments, or one of the sentiments from the Witch Please stamp set. And these little ones are like very, you know, thin lined sentiments. And that's also why I wanted to use the black embossing powder with it, because I was like, I want to keep that detail. And again, all the other times before this, I would just stamp it in black and emboss it in clear. You can stamp it in black and leave it. That's fine. But again, I end up smearing it. I did that on my live video the other day. Stamped a sentiment with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and I smeared it because I didn't heat emboss it, because that's just what I do. So I always need to heat emboss it because it's just a given. So I stamped those sentiments. And I'd use just the pointy end of my little die pick tool to remove, you know, just a couple of the little random grains of embossing powder that still decided to be stubborn. And then after I heat emboss those little sentiments, I used my sentiment label wafer dies from Simon Says Stamp. And I have 2 sets of these. I mentioned that, I think, in the live video the other day as well. I have purchased like a second set because I use these so often, and you know, I like to do multiples of cards, etc. So it's just convenient to have more than one. So I die cut those with one of the sentiment label wafer dies. I had cleaned off the wildflower silhouette image, and I have 2 more panels of white cardstock, and these are going to be the inside of my cards. And I end up like I basically recreate the entire scene on the inside as well. It just, everything was coming together. It was just working. Things like this, when I go extra on the insides, I will write over this because people do ask, like, where do you write to the recipient? Like, you filled up the insides. I'll write over it. I don't care. Like, this is all just extra and it all just worked. And I kept the darker stamping like this to the bottom. I used that midnight ink with a silhouette image. So this will be kind of, you know, at the bottom of this panel. It's a slimline card, so there's a fair bit of space for writing. And after I stamp that, the silhouette witch, I'm going to stamp in the lightest blue ink. So that gives, again, I will write right over that. Like, it's fine. So I stamped that in the marine ink and then repeated the process with the second one. And then I'm going to stamp one of the sentiments from the Witch Please stamp set. This is also why it's a favorite, because Kathy Zielski and her like choice in typography and her sentiments and everything, like, love it, love it, love it. So the inside will say, have a bewitching Halloween, stamp that in black. And I couldn't resist adding my other favorite sentiment from this set, which is, it says, from your favorite witch. I can't not put that on there, because especially if it's a card coming from me, I'm like, yes. So I lined that up right below that sentiment, and that one I stamped in the CADETTE ink. So I've got like all those shades of blue going on the inside as well. So I stamped that onto those panels, and that finishes off what will be on the inside of the card. Although, yeah, this totally could be a card front. I know. But sometimes everything just works. So after I did that, I took those sentiments that I had die cut and stacked together, and I'm going to adhere those to the card fronts. So put craft tacky glue on the backs of these. And once I got that adhered into place, I've got all those little dots for the eye there in the little tray, because otherwise they just grow legs and walk away. That's just one of the rules. So I got those, and I just adhere them into place directly onto the card front, just using my little embellishment wand there. Place a dot of glue, place that in place, and then the ones from the glitter cardstock were still like in the glitter cardstock, which was perfect. So I'd save those till it was done. Got that adhered. And then the little companion sentiment, I'm going to adhere with just a little thin waffle flower foam strip, and then I'll pop that into place. And then I just repeat that on the second card front. So once I've got all of those adhered, I need to make my card bases. And for my card bases, I pulled out some soft navy cardstock, and I cut it down to 7 inches by 8.5 inches. And then I'm going to score it at 3.5 inches. So these will be 3.5 by 8.5 inch slimline cards. So scored those with my Teflon bone folder, reinforced that fold with just the side of the bone folder, and yeah, have to flip it around because my little score buddy is just a little 6-inch one. So got that reinforced. So now I've got my card bases. I'm going to adhere the insides of the cards to the insides, or the inside panel to the insides. So adhere that with some craft tacky glue, and same thing, I'd cut those down to like 3.25 by 8.25 so that the card base kind of frames it a little bit. Got those adhered, and then I'm going to adhere the card front to the card base, and that's actually going to finish it off. I did think about adding like bling, all of the things, but I actually decided against it. Still could if I wanted to, but I was like, at this point I was like, no, I'm done. We're going to stop here. You know, I pushed my luck with the black embossing powder. So we're just going to leave it there. And besides, we got the splatter and the glitter of the black glitter embossing powder, the glitter sentiment, and all of it. Everything just came together. Like the shades of blue and the moon background and the sparkly glittery witch and the sentiment and just all the things. Again, these were super, super fun to create. So, like I mentioned in the intro, I will have a link to my playlists at the end of this video. I'll have a link to the Halloween playlist. I'll have a link to the Wildflowers playlist. You guys can check those out if you're interested. And haven't seen some of those videos. And then directly below the video, I will have a link to my blog post. And in the blog post, it's picture links and all the pictures of the cards, etc. So all that info will be directly below for anyone who is interested. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting, letting those robot overlords know you guys like what you see. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.